I used to think I had the perfect in-laws. When I first met Connor, he was charming, quiet in that thoughtful way that makes you feel like you're the only one he's really listening to, and completely devoted to his family. His mom Linda was warm, maybe a little overbearing, but in a mom who cares too much way. His dad worked construction and always had grease on his hands, but he was respectful, kind, and never made me feel like an outsider. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Family dinners every Sunday. Vacations at the lake. Group chats that pinged all day long. But the cracks started to show after we moved into the old farmhouse they gifted us. It was generous, almost too generous. A fully paid-off home in the same town where Connor grew up, nestled in the hills of northern Pennsylvania. At first I was ecstatic, until Linda started showing up unannounced. At first it was cute dropping off pies, checking on the garden, but then it became constant. Every morning at 7 a.m., she'd be in the kitchen like she still lived there. Rearranging drawers. Cleaning counters that weren't dirty. Asking questions about when we'd have kids. I tried to talk to Connor about it, but he just smiled and said, "That's just how she is. She means well." Then I found the basement. We didn't even know there was one until a storm knocked the power out and I was fumbling for the circuit box. I found a trapdoor under the hallway rug. It led to a dark, musty room filled with boxes, old furniture, and strangely files. Dozens of them, neatly labeled and organized. At first I thought maybe it was paperwork from Connor's dad's job. But then I saw the names. Not clients. Not invoices. Just names. And photos. And newspaper clippings. Obituaries. The file that stopped me cold said Angela Matthews 1994. Inside were photos of a girl about my age, her high school ID, and a missing persons flyer. I heard the trapdoor creak above me and nearly jumped out of my skin. Linda's face appeared at the top. "You weren't supposed to come down here," she said. Not angry. Not surprised. Just cold. I didn't know what to say. I held the file in my hand like a shield. She descended the steps slowly, not breaking eye contact. "Angela was a troubled girl," she said. "She ran away. That's what everyone thinks." "What happened to her?" I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's. "She got too close," Linda said. "Too curious. Some families," she paused, smiled tightly, "don't survive curiosity." I didn't sleep that night. Connor tried to dismiss it all. Said Angela was a distant cousin, and Linda kept all those files because she couldn't let go. That she blamed herself. That it was her way of coping. But I saw the look in Linda's eyes. That wasn't grief. That was protection. Of what? I wasn't sure. Until I found more. The files weren't just about Angela. There were 4 others. All girls. All went missing within a 10-year span. All somehow connected to Connor's high school. And one photo in particular made me feel like the room was spinning. It showed Connor and 2 other boys standing next to a red pickup truck. In the background Angela. Laughing. Alive. Maybe hours before she vanished. I showed Connor. He stared at it in silence for what felt like forever. Then he said, "You can't tell anyone." That's when I realized I didn't marry into a family. I married into a secret. I didn't sleep for days after that conversation with Connor. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Angela's face, that smile, that photo, the red truck, and Connor's blank expression when he said you can't tell anyone haunted me. I tried to press him. I begged him to tell me what happened to her, but he kept shutting down, locking himself in his office or leaving the house for hours at a time. He said I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that his mother was just a grieving woman obsessed with the past, but his eyes told a different story. There was guilt there, real guilt and fear, and the more I pushed the more distant he became. So I started digging on my own. I went back to the basement every night after Connor went to bed. I poured through every file, every newspaper article, and slowly a pattern emerged. All 5 missing girls were part of a church youth group, the same one Connor grew up in, the same one his father helped run, and all 5 girls disappeared within days of the annual summer retreat held at a cabin up in the Allegheny Woods. I found photos of those retreats, group shots of smiling teens, campfires, canoe rides, always the same handful of adults in the background. Connor's dad, Linda, even the local sheriff, who was now retired. And just like that it hit me, this wasn't grief or coincidence, this was a cover-up, one that spanned decades. I tried to contact one of the other families, the mother of a girl named Rachel Dunn, but when I mentioned Angela's name she hung up on me. The next day Linda showed up at the house with a basket of muffins and a smile like nothing had changed. She didn't mention the files or the basement or Angela. She just asked if we had considered naming our first daughter after her. It was a threat masked in sweetness, and I knew it. I told Connor we needed to leave that night, pack up and go start fresh anywhere else, but he wouldn't budge. He kept saying it was all in the past, that no one needed to get hurt, and I realized then that he was part of it. Maybe not the crimes themselves, but the silence, the protection, the family above all else. And when I told him I was going to the police, he didn't stop me. He just said, if you do this you're not coming back. And that's when I knew my marriage was over. I left with nothing but my car, my laptop, and a flash drive filled with copies of every file I'd scanned in secret. I drove 3 hours to the next city and filed a report, but the officer barely looked at it. He said the cases were cold, decades old, no new evidence, no cause to reopen. I offered to show him everything, but he told me without living witnesses or physical proof it would never go anywhere. I was furious, heartbroken, betrayed, but not broken. I found a journalist instead, someone who'd written about the church's involvement in other scandals. He listened, he believed me, and he took everything I gave him. Within a week he was digging deeper than I ever could, calling in favors, talking to retired cops, trying to find survivors or witnesses. And then one night he called me and said, meet me at the cabin. I found it the same cabin from the photos. I drove there in silence, heart pounding, and when I arrived I saw the red truck parked out front, the same one from the photo, and Connor standing beside it holding something wrapped in cloth. When he saw me he didn't smile, didn't speak. He just said, you couldn't leave it alone, could you? And I suddenly realized I was alone in the woods with a man who might know exactly what happened to Angela Matthews. And what might happen to me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would drown out the crickets in the woods. I stepped back instinctively, my keys clenched in one hand, the flashlight in the other. Connor didn't move. He just kept holding the bundle and staring at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Or maybe he finally saw me for who I really was, a threat, not a wife, not a partner, just a woman who dug too deep and asked the wrong questions. I said his name once quietly, but there was no response, just a cold stare, and then he tossed the bundle to the ground. It thudded softly and rolled open, revealing a stack of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and beneath it all a VHS tape with Angela's name written in smudged marker. I froze. Connor said, I never wanted you to find out this way, but you wouldn't let it go. You don't understand what she did to this family, what she would be exposed. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to speak. He kept talking, almost like he was confessing, but not really remorseful, just tired, like carrying the truth had finally worn him down. He told me Angela had discovered something about the church, about the way young girls were being chosen for special mentorships, and how none of them ever made it to college, how the records kept disappearing, how certain men always had access, and how her name was next on the list. She tried to go public and someone stopped her. He didn't say who, but the implication was clear. And then he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, I think she was Pregnant, I think it was my father. I felt my knees give out. I sat on the dirt and tried not to scream. The journalist arrived minutes later, headlights slicing through the trees. Connor didn't run, he didn't threaten us, he just picked up the tape, handed it to the journalist and said, do what you want with it, and then walked into the cabin and locked the door. The journalist called the state police that night. I gave them everything, the tape, the documents, the files ID scanned. Months passed and the investigation exploded across the media. The church was implicated, so was the sheriff. 2 more bodies were discovered near the cabin, shallow graves. DNA confirmed one of them was Angela Matthews, the other was Rachel Dunn, the girls whose mothers were silenced for decades. Connor's father was arrested, charged with multiple counts including abuse, conspiracy and murder. Linda fled the state. No one has seen her since. The entire community turned upside down. Lawsuits, protests, vigils, and me. I testified. I sat in front of cameras and families and prosecutors and told the story I thought would destroy me, and instead it saved me. I moved out of state. I started over. I changed my name, but I never forgot Angela. I never forgot the way the truth burned, even when it set me free. And sometimes late at night I watch the sky and think of all the girls who vanished without a trace, and I promise them, even if it takes everything, I will not let them be forgotten, not ever.